Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Schulz, and I want to welcome you all to this session, Financing UBI. We have 60 minutes, so I think we'll start right on. But I want to just quickly remind you, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat for those hearing online. I will collect them after each session, after each presentation. We have time for questions, and I will read them out loud to the speaker then. And of course, I welcome the other speakers as well to ask questions or give comments to the presentations. So to take the time, we start right on with Helmo Pape. He is the founder of Generation Grundeinkommen, which is in English Generation Basic Income, and in Austria. And yeah, I just give Helmo the floor now.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and hello everybody from beautiful Vienna. I'm really glad to share some thoughts with you because quite recently here in Austria, carbon tax, a very little one, has been implemented, and to make it social or to give it a social component, there was kind of a tax pre-fund, so a carbon tax refund paid in advance to every one living in Austria. So not only citizens, but everybody, even homeless people. But I wanted to scale this thought and share it with you, what a kind of ecological tax regime with a UBI seen as a tax refund could look like. So here we go. What are taxes actually? We have different names for them, but more or less they are the income of state authorities. So that they make sure that the currencies states used are demanded. They have hundreds of names like carbon tax or data tax, income tax, wealth tax, but when you look at them and you try to categorize them, you come to the conclusion that there are only three big realms where they can be assorted to. And that is mostly income, and I mean also corporate profits by that. Revenue, so what you more or less would measure by turnover, data, kilowatts, euros, and wealth. Wealth is a kind of a different one because you don't measure a flow of something, but a consistent measure. So when you have to choose out of these three realms, what would be the more sustainable or the most sustainable one? And if you think about automation and digitalization, human labor and therefore human income can become deprived. So maybe revenue is something that also keeps machines and data in the equation. And wealth is, of course, something that is not heavily implemented. In Austria, we have no wealth tax worth mentioning at all. But you have to address inequality. So stop growing inequality would be crucial for cohesion in society. So what is important to know here? Corporations can't pay taxes that they haven't collected beforehand from customers and clients or owners. So corporations are never paying tax themselves. They are kind of, branches of the Ministry of Finance. So everything you impose on corporations will find its way into prices. That drives me to my second conclusion, that all prices end up as incomes of individuals. We cannot clearly distinguish which part of a price will be which part of an income, because as you imagine, when you have a tax being a part of a price you pay, what does the state do with this collected tax? It will pay, state employees, or it will maybe build a road and then pay, people working for the road building company, and maybe it will give it to you directly via a subsidy or something. So all prices, even taxes and interest rates and everything, end up being an income of a human. And all incomes can only handled in two ways. You either spend it, which also includes investing it, or you save it. So it either goes back directly into the economy or later. And that leads to the following assumptions. So everybody in a not self-sufficient society needs an income to acquire goods and services from other people. So we're quite glad that money exists to do that. But on the other hand, it's kind of the prerequisite for living. Everybody needs an income in order to survive. So having said that, you can say that your consumption, at least the very minimum of consumption, sticks to your existence. So you will consume where you live. And if you have a high correlation with income, and therefore with the use of resources, because every consumption is in one way or the other also a use of resources, and if it's only air or something, you have kind of built the bridge to not tax income anymore, to make an individual tax. You could also tax consumption and also reach an individual taxation. So if you relieve the tax from all human labor, you would encourage a culture of sharing, caring, and repairing, because all these things I mentioned are hard to standardize. So you can standardize production and sell new stuff easily with lots of machines and algorithms helping you. But if something's broken, or even you're unhealthy, you need a lot of human effort to make you healthy again, or to repair a broken house or a broken mobile phone. So we kind of make this logical shift from making income the main source of taxation to making consumption the main source of taxation. So that would be, in our view, the more sustainable approach. So labor should be, in the long run, being taxed the same as machine labor is taxed now. So no tax at all. And if you tax consumption instead, you bring all the produce and the services of machines, and also everything that is being imported into your country onto the same tax regime, which is, in our approach, only value-added tax. But if you have only value-added tax, you kind of lose the goal that an income taxation tries to reach, and that is income and later wealth distribution. So if this distributional function falls away, you need to impose progressive wealth taxation to address this otherwise accumulating inequality. So now we have the Austrian case. We have quite a high standard of living, well-being, social cohesion, very little crime. We have best quality of water, air, soil, food. We are in, I would put it, an ecologically alert society. So we're quite aware of what we got from nature. We have a world-class education and also academia, rich in culture and a diverse society. Even our economy is doing good. We've managed the last 2 years quite well. The welfare state is going strong and reaching out to many people. We have a sound pension system, but, and this is a big but, we have also in Austria to recognize that there is an erosion of the middle class. So with no wealth taxes and the income tax not being very efficient doing so, we have rising inequality. And of course, for people, having the fear of being left out of the society, we have the rise of mostly right populism, playing with all kinds of fears of losing your financial existence. So we would like, as a food of thought, to have you wrapping your heads around the idea to transfer all hundreds of sorts of taxes, around this central consumption tax. We would say this is a value added tax as it works or is implemented now already in Austria. And we have teamed up with the University of Linz to make a simulation, a suggestion how high this consumption tax should be or must be to get rid of all other taxes and provide for a modest universal basic income. We suggested 1,000 euros every month for adults, half the sum for children until the age of 18. So this would result in more or less 100% value added tax. But be careful, 100% sounds very frightening, but it's nothing different than 50% off from, let's say, an income. So 50% off is the same as 100% added on the net price. Well, you should be heavily incentivized if you earn something extra. So we would have no income taxation at all. Every euro you earn additionally as an individual through economic activity, you could keep it. The progressive wealth tax, as I mentioned earlier, would keep inequality in check. And an effect that I will skip here, but I want to mention it, is that when everybody has a UBI and no taxes on human labor are imposed, local products will be a lot cheaper and imports would become more expensive. But in general, the price level would be more or less the same. So we could make a setting which is quite forcing and logical. Everyone who lives consumes. Everyone who consumes pays value-added tax through buying stuff. And also a progressive wealth tax if, there is some net positive wealth in place. So we would, of course, put debt in the equation. So nobody being indebted to buy a house or something should pay for the house when it's not, technically his. So, and when everybody pays tax, well, where's the tax threshold? Where's the, social component? And that would be that everybody gets the same tax pre-fund, as I put it, for normal or sustainable standard of living. And that could also be called a universal basic income, because it's no other condition required than living in that country, being known to the, Ministry of Finance. We have a system in Austria that is keeping track of who's moving in, who's moving out, so we could address everybody living in the country, even homeless people. So this kind of tax regime, putting everything on consumption or value-added tax, would achieve the ecological goal to tax the exhaustion of natural resources, meaning consumption. It would free human labor through first UBI and second, having no taxation on human labor anyhow. So this would be the floor in our society and would encourage a culture of sharing, caring, and repairing, which is in that case possible by UBI and not taxed by human labor taxes or income taxes. And the value-added tax would take care of this contradiction that you have in your country, high social standards and high ecological standards, but no tolls or customs on imports from somewhere else where these standards do not apply. So it would be a kind of a plain or a plain level field for economies locally and globally. That would, of course, let the middle class thrive because you can build up a business or a business case much easier. And the wealth tax would take care of distribution. So we have the UBI as a floor and the wealth tax as the ceiling. And there is a collar between these two measures where wealth or well-being can be stated. So to wrap it up, it's restoring nature while freeing humans with a properly financed UBI. And it could come to the world in one country first and the next one following. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Helmo, for your presentation. And it was really interesting, and I loved the pictures, actually. It was sometimes hard to concentrate with these beautiful pictures of Vienna. There's one question from Malcolm Torrey. Two questions, actually. The first one is, would you want to see the same rate of VAT on services as on goods? And the second is, there are European Union rules about VAT levels. Would those rules permit 100% VAT?
Malcolm, the tricky thing about dividing a value-added tax from goods to services, so a different rate would be that you can view a good as a service that has been crystallized in a product. So if you, let's say, have a table or something, the table is the product, but if you buy instead the service of someone building you a table, you would have a workaround about this taxation. So it's a tricky one, how to implement this. We made this general simulation to have one tax rate on all goods and services to make it easier. But you could, of course, differentiate that out for, let's say, biological produce versus 300 horsepower vehicles or something. And the second one is that the European Union, of course, says there are value-added tax rates that have that shall not be undermined. So the European Union, as far as I'm informed, has minimum levels, not maximum levels. And as you all know, we can additionally tax, for instance, consumer goods like petrol, tobacco, alcohol, stuff like that. So I don't see a heavy restriction by the European Union implementing such a tax scheme.
Thank you, Helmo. If there are follow-up questions, you can put them in the chat while the other presentations as well. But I think time-wise, we go now to our second speaker, Hilde Latour. She is vice chair of BIEN as well as co-founder of Mission Possible 2030 and a board member of the Dutch BIEN and as well initiator of a UBI blockchain collective. So Hilde, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Jessica, for the introduction. Yes, I do wear many hats in the basic income space, and this presentation is my personal opinion and view of things. The title of the presentation is Why the Central Bank Digital Currency is Not Suitable for Basic Income, and this is actually a warning of what is coming. But before we go into the details, I would like to emphasize that the unconditionality of a basic income is not only at the receiving end, but it is also at the spending end. People should have the freedom to spend the money on anything they like. Yeah, so it's not like a voucher. And basic income is first and foremost about freedom of choice and the power to say no. Of course, it will alleviate poverty, but the most important motivation behind basic income is freedom. It's also supported by many human rights articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings should be free and equal in dignity and rights and should act in a spirit of brotherhood without distinction of any kind. We all have a right to life, liberty, and security, and we shall not be held in slavery nor servitude, which means that a participation income is actually servitude and a violation of human rights. We all have, as you know, a right to social security and the free development of our personality, free choice of employment, and we have a right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of ourselves and our family. And when we talk about basic income, we talk about money. And when we talk about money, we talk about banks. And banks create the money. And they have the power to take it away, the power to define the rules, the power over our governments who are in debt and have promised that we will pay this back. And Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of the United States, already warned us. If people ever allow banks to control the issue of our currency, the banks and corporations will deprive the people of all property until our children wake up homeless. And the issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. And the banks have all kinds of tricks. They have fractional reserve banking where money is created out of debt. They print money whenever they want and how much they want, which will create inflation. And inflation, I mean, many people are afraid that basic income will cause inflation. Well, inflation was created by the Fed when it started, when the Fed was created in 1913. That's when creation was introduced. And the bank of all banks, the Bank of International Settlements, the general manager, Mr. Carstens, defines money as an indispensable social convention backed by an accountable institution within the state that enjoys public trust. Accountable? Have you ever met a person who was able to hold a bank accountable for its actions? No. These institutions are so powerful that if you dare to fight against them, they will break you. And also, many people, particularly in the global south, don't even have access to a bank account. They define the rules. But money is basically an IOU record, a ledger. And when societies became more complex and transactions were needed between people who didn't know each other, trusted third parties were hired to do the bookkeeping. And now we're stuck with a banking system that no one really trusts, but we cannot do without because of international trade. Until Bitcoin was launched, it is now possible to participate in international trade without the use of banks. A decentralized ledger based on algorithms instead of powerful white men who change the rules all the time. And in the slipstream of Bitcoin, we now have tens of thousands of digital assets that are used for payments. And people and communities can create their own currencies. This, of course, made the banks nervous. So they are now working on a central bank digital currency to compete with that, in an effort to preserve their position and power over the financial markets and economic transactions. The future will tell us which system will enjoy public trust: the accountable institutions that stole our wealth, or decentralized automated systems such as Bitcoin. And there's not so much needed for a trusted ledger with the technology of today. We only need a few wallets to send and receive. We need a timestamp for the bookkeeping, and we need to know how much value is transferred and in which amount or type of currency the transfer is created. And of course, it should be fraud resistant. And yes, Bitcoin and other digital assets is threatening the US dollar as a world reserve currency. But so are the BRICS countries, who organized themselves years ago. What is really threatening for the financial system is that people don't need banks anymore. And that fundamentally disrupts the power structures, because governments are not controlled by the people, but by a corrupt system of banks and multinationals owned by around 8,000 people who we don't know. And Bitcoin is already accepted in many countries. And the central bank digital currency is being developed in most countries as well. And this is how they sell it to you. It's just like cash. Central bank digital currencies are direct claims on the central bank, but only in digital form. But you can look it up. There are numerous reports of the central banks themselves. And if you look and read them, you can read that they can use the central bank digital currencies to stimulate helicopter drops, which they will probably call basic income. But it can also possibly be combined with programmable monetary policy, like transfers with an expiry date, or conditional on being spent on certain goods. And what they define as their key challenge is, it's so difficult to identify recipients and their accounts. The BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, is transforming into a behavioral intervention service with money that is programmable. I already mentioned the examples of an expiry date. They can only be spent on certain goods and services, but they can also introduce limited geographical areas. For example, when you live in the Netherlands, like me, they can program my money that it can only be spent in a certain area around my house. So I will not be able to travel abroad because I will not be able to spend my money there. And of course, the money can also be programmed dependent on my compliance on their rules. What they will introduce is geographical central bank digital currencies with their own rules. For example, different rules in the United States than in Europe or Australia. And the people living in those areas will have different rules and will have different limitations in spending their currencies. And it's not a challenge for them to identify us. They already stole our eyeballs, our fingerprints, our facial structures, our heartbeats, and these are all connected to our passports, our medical records, our income statements, our driver's license, and they also know if we comply to their rules. So what will be introduced is a class system of different classes of people, like the common people, which is maybe 99%, depending on how many people comply. But there will also be a category of sovereign, free, privileged people that have the freedom to spend their money anywhere they want. There will be a class of restricted people that will be punished for not compliance of the rules, and there will be the quarantine people that are not going to be willing to comply to anything. So what will it look like? You as a person will get your wallet. And your wallet will be restricted, or if you're in the category of sovereign people, it will be unlimited. Within that wallet, you will have currencies. Some of those currencies will be you will be able to spend anywhere you want. But some of those will have a limited time that you can expend them, and after that time is passed, these currencies will be burned. And some of the currencies will be limited in where you spend it on. And all the products that you can spend it on will also have an ID, so they will know exactly where you spend your money on. And eventually you will only be able to buy things that you are authorized to buy. It's a system of monitoring, prediction, manipulation, and control of behavior. Yes, this is a social credit system. And they will try to drag you in by giving you a income. And they will call it a basic income, but it's actually a conditional income. And there will be several conditions. But the most important one is that you will have to update your app to have access to your money. If you don't update your app, if an update is available, you will not have access to your money. And they're already experimenting with it in the Ukraine. The banks are already experimenting with analyzing your transactions. They will offer you insight in your carbon footprint, but very soon they will limit your expenditure of your money depending on your carbon footprint. The central bank digital currency, in conclusion, is not suitable for basic income by design. It's not unconditional, it's very conditional, especially on the spending side. So it is our choice. Are we going to go into a future of total surveillance and control, or are we going to stand up against this and create our own money? For example, by using the blockchain technology, create complementary currencies by communities or individuals. And I think that the basic income movement has to stand up against this system of total control. Sorry, it's not a very optimistic message, but I think we have a very limited time envelope to prevent us for the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilde, for this presentation. We have already not a question, but a comment. Well done for addressing these issues. And yeah, I think maybe it's not a happy message, but it's really important to addressing it, and was a really interesting presentation. There's a question from Helmo, and I would suggest, Helmo, you just ask, since you're a speaker as well. I just mute myself and you can ask yourself.
Very well. So Hilde, I was just curious, what's your thoughts about the reaction of the people being imposed such a central bank digital currency? I would think that if people are, not wanting this, so if it's not voluntarily, like maybe it would be in Scandinavia, people would skip to alternative currencies, maybe even cigarettes, like in prisons, but maybe dollars or other mediums of exchange. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that's the only way we can escape from this. They will try to make us comply to the central bank digital currency, and they will probably make other ways illegal. But we have a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws, and I think we will have to find other ways to exchange goods and services, and we can use the cigarettes or petrol or whatever. But of course, it's going to be a bumpy ride, and there are many initiatives already of people that and communities and groups that are trying to use complementary currencies as a means of exchange, and I think that's the only way. We really have to say no to this.
Is there a follow-up question or comment of you? If not, I will read another question from Hans Hoyer. You have pointed out the misuse of the UBI payment. Cash is also misused. According to an old rule of law, misuse does not nullify proper use. Ali Mutlu stated earlier that democracies must and will enable basic income, which in fact will be the savior of themselves. Do you disagree to that statement?
That democracies must and will enable basic income. Yes, but the question is, can this be done? Should this be a central government which is controlled by, multinationals, banking systems, and things like that, or can we introduce a community-based basic income, which uses more like direct democracy? And I think we're now in a transition phase where we have the choice, because the democracy that we're having now is not a true democracy. We can vote for members of parliament, but the actual ministries are not people. The actual ministers are not people that we voted for. So yeah, it's let's say interesting times where we're heading to, and I see more and more communities that are organizing themselves, and I'm very optimistic about what we're heading towards. But we have to acknowledge that the democratic systems that we think we are in are not real, true democratic systems.
There's a follow-up question to this, which fits, I think, from Moon Li Leong. Are we doing anything to make this a priority, wanting to get it out to the UBI community at large? Bien front page feature? Question mark.
Yeah, well, I'm of course vice chair of Bien, but this is not something that I can decide. But I do think that it's worthwhile to have this discussion out in the open, because I mean we've had many discussions in the past of people that think vouchers should be could be a way of sort of like do something like basic income. And the central digital currency, as I showed you, can actually be compared with a voucher system. So I think this can be discussed in the open, and it should be discussed in the open, which is why I did this presentation.
Thank you. We have another anonymous question. I just read it. Does the UBI movement need to address these risks more, as conspiracy theorists are currently conflating UBI with conditional participation income policies, social credit systems, and are warning the public not to support UBI?
Thank you for addressing that. I'm actually in the Netherlands. I've been invited a few times in the alternative media to discuss this, and many people that are so-called conspiracy theorists are against basic income. I think what I always reply to them, what you are afraid of is not a basic income, and I refer them to the definition, to Bien's definition. But it's a very hard discussion because somewhere in their minds they are afraid of an income that is going to be implemented by the new world order, and I share their fears. But I think the only thing we can do is keep explaining to them that the basic income that we are talking about is a truly unconditional basic income, and explain to them that they use our term, they basically hack the term basic income for something that is not a basic income. And it's a difficult discussion because people are quite sometimes even aggressive in their conversations. But we just have to stay calm and keep repeating that the unconditionality is the core characteristic of the basic income that we are advocating for.
There is another comment more from Helmo. Frankly speaking, Hilde's warnings are in a way the status quo, meaning we in Austria have a basic income, but means tested and with lots of conditions applied. Helmo, maybe you can exaggerate a bit.
I would like to emphasize that same as in Hilde's bubble, I also encountered these warnings. UBI is a tool to suppress us, are becoming more and more frequent. And I would counter that we have some kind of a suppressive basic income now. That's what we're talking about today. So if you comply to the rules, you will get something from the society. But if you don't, we will drop you. So everybody who does not want to accept these conditions skips the basic income. So everybody who has some money would say, no thanks, I would like to stay free. And so that's the contrast to what we are all proposing. We want the unconditionality, and that's what we do not have now. That's not a warning in the future. That's our status quo. That's what I wanted to point out.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that.
Thank you. Malcolm, I see there's another question from you. I will read it out loud. Normally, according to the program, we have a third presentation, but I asked in the chat as well if John Potzi is there and ready to present. Yeah, I guess not. So we can expand the discussion. We have 20 minutes left. So I think we have already a good discussion going. So I will read the question from Malcolm Torrey now. If a local currency given equality to everyone in a community can only be spent in certain shops and on certain goods and services and not on others, then can such a local currency be regarded as a basic income?
No, probably not. I think we will. Well, I hope that we will eventually end up with a basket of currencies, with some currencies that can maybe only be used in the local community, but also we also definitely need currencies that can be used for international trade. And the future will tell what that will look like. Something like Bitcoin, for example, is already accepted for international payments, but it's difficult, I think, to use Bitcoin for a basic income because, who is going to distribute it and who's going to make sure that this Bitcoin is going to be added to a global sovereign fund from where basic income will be distributed. I don't know what's going to look like, but we definitely are in a rat race, against this new currency, digital currency that the banking system is going to implement. And I don't know. I really don't know what it's going to be like. But somehow we have to find a way to issue our own money and make that acceptable in international trade through decentralized finance systems. But it's very early days. So but that is a very difficult challenge.
May add something to that point. I quite recently read the book The Narrow Corridor from Daron Acemoglu, and he more or less makes the point that there is a constant measure of power between the state and its institutions and society and its values. So if you have a state being too strong, and that is more or less what Hilde was pointing out, you come very soon very closely to fascist or totalitarian societies. And if you have society being far stronger than state institutions, you end up by mafia, clan, or warlord-like society, where the constant war one against the other cannot be ended. So there is, as Daron Acemoglu put it, a narrow corridor where these two forces, the state power and power of society, balance each other out quite carefully. And I think we are now in a shift from where the market forces or the private rights or societal forces are or have been stronger than the state organizations, and it's now shifting towards what Hilde pointed out, that the state, or maybe even a center of power that cannot be regarded as the state, is imposing power on us via the rules of money. So to wrap this up, what I think is going to happen is that we have to win the match about the balance of power. So if people would like to put rules on us that the 99% do not accept, we are in a kind of rebellious society. So we would not stop until we can trust a government or a parliament again. So this shift is kind of what I see in the near future.
You. We have 3 other questions, which all go more or less in the same direction. So I will read 2 out loud afterwards. So the first one is, what does everyone think of replacing the U in UBI to mean unconditional versus universal to drive home the point? And I will add to that question, because it gives in the same direction another anonymous question. To counter the conflicting policies and conspiracy critics, does a UBI need to be redefined as an unconditional basic income in order to make it clear this policy is without conditions?
Yeah, there's always an ongoing discussion about the definition of basic income. I mean, the U stands for universal as well as unconditional, and it's depending on the time frame that we're in, which one is more important to emphasize. But I think in discussions, especially now, we as basic income advocates really have to emphasize the unconditionality, and yeah, it is the most important characteristic today, and maybe in a couple of years' time, universal becomes more important. So I would advocate for keeping the U as it is. I mean, the definition, if you go to the BN website and you look up the definition, if people do their own research, they can find that it's as well universal as unconditional. But in the discussions that we have in the public, especially with the people that are afraid of what's coming, we should really emphasize that our basic income is unconditional, and the meaning of words matter. If I can phrase Malcolm Torrey in this, the meaning of words matter, and that is why a movement like the Basic Income Movement, MBN, is so important, because we are basically the guardians and the stewards to protect basic income. But people are always free to use this term. It's not a protected term. So if Klaus Schwab will call something that is slave money, he will call it basic income. We cannot stop him, but we really have to keep explaining that it is really, really unconditional, and there's no judgment whatsoever on whatever behavior you show, and everyone, the good guys and the bad guys, are entitled to a basic income as a human right.
Thank you so much, Hilda. I think actually you answered the next question already, or this discussion about the U in UBI answered these questions, but I will ask it anyway, not to ignore it. What is basic income if I'm free to spend it for non-basic things? And maybe I'm getting it wrong, but with unconditional, maybe this is answered, but I give the question to you.
I don't know if I understand the question right. What is basic income if I am free to spend it on non-basic things? I mean, basic income, you can spend it on anything you want. And but I think, if I would like to add something that I just thought of, if when this central bank digital currency comes, it's also important. I mean, I have decided that my work, my time, and my energy will not be paid in central bank digital currencies. I will not accept slave money for my work, and that is also something that we can do. It's if they give me a wallet with central bank digital currencies, I may spend it on my rent if they accept it, but my own personal energy will not be paid for in central bank digital currencies. And that is what people will eventually do, and if they realize what this system is about, I think, I hope.
Thank you very much. Maybe, Helmo, do you want to add something?
I would like to add on the previous topic that we cannot overemphasize what unconditionality really is and what it means. But no matter how hard we try, if people mistrust their governments, they will not believe in unconditionality. The dream is too far away. The story is too sweet. So it would be an easier sell if we put some conditions in our proposal. So people would have to be, let's say, at a minimum age or a minimum other requirement. They could easier swallow the story. But that would be a betrayal of the idea. So what I like most about basic income is this unconditionality, that it has no template for the perfect citizen. It does not tell you what to do. It does not tell you what is right. And that is so cool because it throws you to the question, what are you responsible for? What are you actually really wanting to do? And we should not skip that by fulfilling Klaus Schwab's dream and say to people what they have to behave like.
I couldn't unmute myself for some reason, but now it's working again. There aren't any other questions. We have 7 minutes left, so if anyone want to ask a follow-up question, please write it in the chat. Helmo, I really liked what you last said, so maybe I'm just ask a question, because if I understood correctly, I think so people don't believe it's really unconditional, but I mean that is a sign of mistrust. We can see right populist parties rising all over Europe, and it's a form of mistrust. But maybe universal or unconditional basic income shouldn't be orientated by that mistrust, but more give trust to people with that unconditionality. I don't know if I understand right, but that's something I always think. There's this historian, Rutger Bregman, maybe you know him, who always said we have this negative view of people, but in general, people becoming better over history. So maybe creating trust would be better than be orientated by that mistrust people have.
I'm not quite sure if I get your question, but I totally agree with your assumption. So we are in a heavy, mistrustful society now. And it's both ways. So people speak in anger of their governments, but also when you hear politicians talk, how they speak of the people, it is not better. So we kind of offer a new approach, and that's the core, the heart of basic income. That's a belief in other people, in the other individual. So it kind of says, I trust you. And the next month again, I trust you. And the next month again, I still trust you. So, and if that is implemented for a few months, I think in every, I would say, healthy mind, the question will arise, how can I reward this trust? How can I be worthy of this trust? And then, but only then, people will open their minds to how can I contribute to this thing, society, that has maybe treated me so badly in the past.
Yeah, that was, you understood correctly, I think. Thank you for that comment. We have another question, and I think we have time for this question as well. It's anonymous again. Do you think narcissistic neoliberal culture that keeps citizens under control via competition, ruthless exploitation, workfare, winners and losers, and 24/7 market surveillance is an obstacle to UBI?
Absolutely. Yes, I do think, and I think it's, I mean, if you see this system as a narcissist and realize that what you do with a narcissist is you walk away and never look back. And, it's some people some people call it the end game, but it's truly about the question as a human being: do you need to be governed by people in power? Do we really need to be governed? That's the question.
I would like to reply on that. Do we need to be governed, and by whom? So, in my naive view, the basic income, being an unconditional basic income, demands full responsibility by each and every one of us. So there is a government from me on myself, required. So no other entity telling me what's good or wrong, but I have to find out for my values, for my core beliefs, what is right, and then be responsible for it. And that's a hard effort. That's maybe also a reason that the passion about basic income is not that large as it could be, because the excuses that you can put forward to others, that you have not decided the way, maybe morally, ethically, or sustainably, these excuses erode radically your in response what to do with the totally unconditionally given money. And that's the hard part, I think.
Yeah, Helmo. Since we have only 40 seconds left, I think that was a really, really nice sentence for closing. I want to thank you very much for your presentations, but I will, of course, give Hilda as well the possibility to say some final words if she wants.
Thank you, Jessica. I think there was a really, really good discussions about the fundamentals of our values, which goes beyond basic income. But basic income is, embeds all these core values of humanity. And I really enjoyed the discussion. So thank you very much. And keep continuing for freedom.
Don't have anything to add to this nice last sentence. So I wish you all a good evening or good of the rest of the day wherever you are. And yeah, bye.
And